break. I'm really pleased and honored to be hosting this panel, which is on international agencies and spatial planning. And specifically, we'll be discussing the risks, but also the benefits of applying international planning practices and frameworks in a context such as Ukraine. And given that hopefully this is quite an intimate and trusting space, we do really hope to speak quite frankly and openly also about some of the challenges that we have all been experiencing. So just to set the stage for this panel, we essentially have three main objectives. The first is we'd like to introduce to you some of the recovery actors that are present in Ukraine, international and national. We'd like to highlight some of the international frameworks that these actors are applying. So for example, the SDGs, the new urban agenda, but also the new European Bauhaus. And then, as I said earlier, we'd like to discuss the risks and the benefits of applying these different international frameworks. We have four panelists with us today, so I'll briefly introduce each of them. We have two of them here in the room and two online, so we're really kind of working on a hybrid format here. So the first speaker will be Niina Rinne, who you already met during the opening speeches. She's the acting head of the Ukraine Urban Lab of UN Habitat at the moment, so based in Kiev. And Niina is an architect and an urban planner, who previously also worked for UN Habitat in Kenya on urban development projects, as well as in Bangladesh, Somalia, Belize, and Jordan. And before joining the UN, Niina was a technical expert in architecture and urban development for local governments and the private sector in Finland, as you also alluded to earlier. Then our second speaker will be Melanie Steinkemper, who is online, and you can see her here on the screen. Melanie is an urban planner and is currently serving as an associate program management officer at the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe. So UNECE is the acronym which you might be familiar with. And Melanie's work focuses on supporting the national and local governments of Ukraine in planning and preparing for long-term reconstruction efforts with a focus on the cities of Kharkiv and Mykolaiv. And before joining UNECE, Melanie worked as an urban planner in Germany and on urban climate adaptation in India and in Georgia. Our third speaker, also online and also on the screen here, is Oleksandr Shevchenko from Restart. Alex is the founder of Restart, which is an organization of multidisciplinary professionals, which is strongly rooted in the Ukrainian context and with experience in the fields of recovery, spatial, and urban planning. And the mission of Restart is to support the localized and continuous development of a Ukrainian recovery methodology and practice. And then last, but definitely not least, we have our fourth speaker here in the room, Yaryna Stepanyuk from ULEAD and GIZ. And Yaryna is a local development advisor at the ULEAD with Europe program, which is a multi-donor initiative by the EU and its member states, such as Germany, Poland, Denmark, and Slovenia. And Yaryna coordinates measures related to municipal infrastructure, reconstruction projects, capacity development for local self-government officials, and ULEAD activities, including the new European Bauhaus, so one of the bigger frameworks that we'll be looking at here today. Before we start, we wanted to hold a very quick participation poll. So as you can see on the screen, there's a QR code to a Mentimeter, where we'd just like to gather a little bit of your insights from the audience about what you think the risks and the benefits are of applying international frameworks to the Ukraine context. We'll leave this up here for a little while, and then we'll actually switch to the word cloud as well. And the idea is just here to gather a bit of what you think at the moment prior to the panel discussion, and then also perhaps for some of our panelists to pick up on some of the words that come up. So perhaps we can switch to the screen with the results, if that's possible. Okay, great. So the first question was about the greatest risks that you see in applying international frameworks to recovery and spatial planning in Ukraine. And we see issues around legislation, adapting to the local context, corruption, increased cost, local capacity, and the war, of course. Okay, so that's interesting. So I'm guessing in terms of legislation, like the issue of adapting or responding to the local legislation in Ukraine, hijacking by corrupt officials, covering up local problems, local norms and regulations. Okay, so a lot around perhaps also some pre-existing issues such as corruption, but also understanding the context, understanding the legislation and responding to that, and maybe failing to do so, given that we're looking at risks here. It's a cover for neocolonialism, so very interesting. Superficiality, so maybe a lack of understanding of the local context as well. And neglecting of local considerations, conditions, perhaps, yeah. Okay, I think these are very much in line also with some of the things we have experienced. If we go to the next question, if we're able to do that. About the benefits, exactly. So now thinking about the positive side of international actors, international frameworks being applied. Let's see if we can get some answers. Hopefully they're not zero benefits. Let's see. Just checking with the audience. Have you submitted something? Okay. Okay, maybe we're experiencing a technical issue, but still risks. Okay. It's okay. Maybe we'll get back to that in the end when we have the final questions. But yeah, we'll start with the presentations from the panelists. So essentially the way we will structure this is that each panelist will give a brief introductory presentation, and then we'll have some follow-up questions and also time for audience questions from your side. So our first panelist is Niina Rinne, and I'll pass over to her to make her introduction.
Okay, thank you very much and welcome again. My name is Niina Rinne and I'm an architect and urban planner, and I have been in this UN bubble almost 10 years. So this presentation is more overview of the international aid and my personal reflections. And we're gonna also zoom out from Ukraine, so to give a bit of more global perspective into the discussion. And if we start with the international aid, I think often the narrative or the picture is now disappeared. All right. So now we go back. So often if you think about international aid, it might be often like this kind of narrative that Western people are providing food in Africa. So I just want to acknowledge that there are many problems and challenges in the international aid globally. Also like white supremacy and colonialism and to be a white savior, but we're not gonna focus on those during this presentation, but just good to acknowledge. Instead of seeing international aid as providing food and shelter kits, we are focusing now more on providing technical assistance, as UN Habitat is doing in many countries, and more focusing on the development field, not just the pure humanitarian. So UN Habitat, we are promoting sustainable cities, and we have been doing that already 50 years. And 50 years ago, there was a need for an agency that would tackle the challenges regarding the urbanization, as well as how to deal with the rapidly growing cities. And we are still on the same path. And as we say, we try to figure out the challenges and solve the challenges regarding the urbanization. Yet these days, it's also highly related to the climate change and environmental degradation, as well as conflict and migration. And all of these big megatrends are obviously interlinked, and we cannot only talk about urbanism without these huge megatrends. If we think about global displacement by conflicts, it's mainly happening in the Sahel in Africa, and then there's like conflict by natural disasters more in the Southeast Asia. But now in the recent years, there is a war in Ukraine, and Ukraine has become a hotspot also for the internal displacement and external or displacement in general. And UN Habitat has extensive experience on contexts like Kenya, how to develop plans in the refugee camps and contexts and settlements, as well as in Haiti after the earthquake. And we also have experience from Bangladesh, where there was a huge refugee influx as well. And maybe now the question is, how relevant are these type of contexts and UN Habitat experience in Ukraine? So the first risk is, of course, like maybe these international frameworks, that how the knowledge can be localized and can be put in the right context. And then UN Habitat and its member state requested support in Ukraine, as well as the government of Ukraine, and we set up the country office, and we became part of the UN family in Ukraine. Of course, we are not the only one. There are many, many other UN agencies. We all like these baby blue logos. So the risk is also that it might be quite overwhelming, particularly for the local governments. And there might be also risk of overlapping things, or maybe things are not so well coordinated. So these are, some concerns we should really tackle. And we also have many other organizations and financing institutions, and all of them at the same time in Ukraine as the new players. Of course, there are also positive side as the financing opportunities, which should be really leveraged. Then I would say, of course, the added value is these global frameworks and UN facilitating. Of course, it's quite impressive to have a global framework or global vision for sustainable urban development. But then the question is how these very broad frameworks being translated into the local context. And if it's only understood in a high level or UN bubble or international context, and how relevant is it in the local. I would say a good example is the Lviv voluntary local review. So at least they have used SDGs as a guidance framework to how to then improve their city and local context. That's also what UN Habitat is promoting. So we are wanting to translate all these quite generic frameworks or high-level frameworks into more tangible actions and tangible guidebooks. For example, we had this Our City Plans platform, which then supports the local planning processes and how to make it in a more sustainable way as well. We have also produced design guidelines, again, translating these global frameworks into more actionable principles at the local context. And we used a lot of spatial data, and particularly UN Habitat's Urban Lab, we're doing many pilot projects which try to also identify the solutions on a local level, which can be then scaled up to the international level as well. And furthermore, all these spatial tools and planning is often a good way to illustrate all the key actions and what needs to be taken into consideration on the local, and make it very understandable also for people who are not architects and planners. So I would say as a conclusion, the international frameworks, they are good. However, there needs to be also a connection to the building scale and local scale. And I think UN Habitat is also a good partner or entity to facilitate this discussion, vice versa. So I think we can also think about what are the lessons from Ukraine that would help rebuilding somewhere else? And what are the points we should then highlight in the international or global discourse? So that's my quick reflection for thank you very much, and feel free to contact.
Thank you so much, Niina. And we'll come back to some questions also around UN Habitat and being a new actor in Ukraine in particular. For now, we'll hand over to Melanie from UNECE to give another UN perspective to bringing international planning practices into Ukraine.
Thank you so much, Charlotte, and thank you for the kind introduction. I hope that everybody can hear me. Perfect. Yes, thank you for the opportunity to speak. Can we bring up my slides, maybe? Okay, while we wait for it, I will just start. Yeah, so today I would like to tell you a bit more about UNECE's UN for Ukrainian Cities project that we are implementing since the middle of 2023, and that will run until the end of this year. And with our project, we are providing technical assistance to the national government of Ukraine and also the city authorities of Kharkiv and Mykolaiv in the efforts towards recovery and reconstruction. And we are doing that by enhancing national and local capacity for planning sustainable urban development and also to create affordable housing. And just to say that our project is funded by the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development and also supported by GIZ. Next slide, please. So yeah, just to give you a quick overview about our activities so you understand what the whole project is about. First, it involves revising the national policy framework for housing. Here we are working closely with the Ministry for Communities and Territories. Second, we are assessing the economic and demographic situation in Kharkiv and Mykolaiv. And also we're formulating future scenarios, which helps us with the planning. Third, we are formulating concept master plans, like citywide spatial strategies and also concrete pilot projects in both cities. And we are also trying to identify potential investors support the implementation of the concept master plans. Fourth, we are focusing on capacity building and city-to-city networking. And then lastly, we are developing a city project tracker for transparent monitoring of the implementation process of the concept master plans. And all these components together aim to enhance urban planning, sustainable infrastructure development, and community resilience. Today, I will focus on component 3 of the project, since it's the most relevant for our discussion today. Yeah, you already see on the screen. I would like to start talking about our activities that we are doing together with the city of Mykolaiv. So this part of the project is in partnership with the OneWorks Foundation, who are sitting in Milan. And here we're working on a citywide concept master plan that is divided into different strategies. So first, there's the urban design strategy. Then there's also the landscape strategy, where we are looking at a new green urban grid. And then lastly, there's the transport and mobility strategy. For example, yeah, there's like planning of a new bridge to connect 2 different parts of the cities and many other things. Next slide, please. Yeah, besides the strategy, one concrete pilot project is being developed in Mykolaiv. This is the Innovation District. And within this district, the housing sector is under development and research. So unfortunately, we don't have the time to go into all the details of these different strategies and plans and the pilot project. But on our website at unforukrainiancities.org, you can find all the plans, the different renderings, and a lot more information on the strategies in case you're interested. Next slide, please. Then in Kharkiv, our approach is a bit different. In Kharkiv, we are developing together with the city the three pilot projects, together also with the Norman Foster Foundation. And these allow for like a real case application of the concept master plan that was developed in an earlier stage of the project. Currently, we have completed a housing competition, we're doing a heritage competition, and we're doing a feasibility study for a new science neighborhood within the city. Next slide, please. So for you to understand better, as an example, let me just talk quickly about the housing competition that we have launched in cooperation with the Norman Foster Foundation, Bildner, and of course the city of Kharkiv. So the competition was focused on Soltivka, one of the most populated formerly most populated districts in Kharkiv, as well as the most damaged due to the war. And the competition called for the development of an innovative modular system capable of retrofitting some of the existing concrete panel housing blocks, and also about enhancing public space and create safe and energy efficient neighborhoods. And given the similarity of the residential areas across Kharkiv, the great ambition of this competition was also to then duplicate the winning designs to other residential areas throughout the city. Next slide, please. Yeah, here you could just see some of the buildings and sites that were included in the competition area. Next slide, please. And earlier this month, we announced the winners of the competition, which you can see here. So the competition's first prize was awarded to the submission Healing Kharkiv from Rubble to Renewal, which is a collaborative project by Kandal and Gensler from the UK. And for the jury that consisted of international and Ukrainian architects and urban planners, the winning proposal really stood out for its innovative approach to reinforcing buildings using locally manufactured recycled materials, and also, yeah, while incorporating at the same time like winter gardens, sustainable features, and other sustainable features that promote community healing. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is also another drawing from the same submission. All these drawings, also like the second and third place and some honorable mentions, you can find on our website. Next slide, please. Yes, I would also like to mention the other ongoing competition that we're having right now, so which is the redesign of the Kharkiv Freedom Square, one of Ukraine's most important symbols. I'm sure you have also heard about the recent attacks earlier this week there. And here we are working with the same project partners to reimagine the heart of the city and create a new landmark. You can scan the QR code if you're interested to hear more or even participate in the competition. It's able to download the brief on the website. Yes, one of the most important things, we have also drafted a background paper explaining how our work in the two cities aligns with the national planning legislation. So in the paper, we start with investigating the governance and legal framework surrounding spatial planning and reconstruction in Ukraine. And then we move on to explaining the role of the concept master plans that we are developing within our project, and also the interconnection to the national level policy and planning framework with regards to the general plan and the detailed plans and so on. Next slide, please. Yeah, I know we are running out of time, so I will just quickly mention the toolbox for building back better that we have launched in August 24. You can also find it on our website. The toolbox offers assistance for cities across Ukraine in developing spatial plans for long-term development. You can find a lot of practical tools, templates, and examples to make the planning process more accessible. Next slide. Yes, so I was also asked to talk about lessons learned regarding the involvement of international actors. And I think there's 3 points that I consider important and I would like to mention. So first is enhanced coordination with stakeholders. So effective coordination with other international organizations and NGOs operating in the same city or region is essential. Especially in our work in Mykolaiv, we see many international organizations and other actors being active. And as Niina already mentioned before in her presentation, it can get quite messy sometimes. And I think it is very important to yeah, to help optimize resources and ensure project alignment and to coordinate really well. For example, we are doing that with UNDP and Mykolaiv. We're also doing different urban development projects together with the city. Yeah, just to duplicate, to not duplicate and prevent overlap. Second is adaptable planning for conflict zones. So yeah, planning for cities impacted by war requires obviously a flexible approach. We are seeing that especially in our work in Kharkiv. And the conditions are always changing, it's very challenging. So we have to be adaptive and resilient to meet the needs and the circumstances. Last one, prioritizing local ownership. So yeah, engaging local communities and fostering local ownership of project is obviously crucial for sustainable outcomes, and also to ensure that the initiatives are grounded in the local context and have support beyond our intervention. Next slide. That's it from my side. This is our social media handles and also our website if you want to know more. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Melanie. And we'll just, in the interest of time, quickly pass over to Oleksandr Shevchenko from Restart. Alex, over to you.
Thanks, Charlotte, for the introduction and for the opportunity to be part of this panel. So while waiting for the slides to actually appear on the screen, I would like to reflect on the topic of the international aid for the field of spatial planning in Ukraine. And I think this is not a new topic which has opened with the full-scale invasion in 2022. I think this layer, this component to spatial and urban planning in Ukraine has been greatly unfolding since 2014, once the decentralization reform has started, and actually it has empowered a number of Ukrainian individual young organizations such as ours to actually take the action and to be more proactive in terms of how we can be helpful to the process of spatial, regional, and urban development as practitioners. So I will give maybe a little of a retrospective of last 3 years through our activity, and then summarize it with 5 key outcomes of this specific component, how international aid actually impacts the scene of recovery in Ukraine from the place we stand. So please switch to the next slide. So this is the example of our very early movement within the Restart initiative, Restart Collective. It wasn't an organization at that time. I think early April, May 2022, once the Chernihiv and Sumy regions were actually regained back to Ukrainian side. So we were trying to think from the perspective of urban planners how we can actually address the rapid planning approach for the city, considering both pre-war strategic opportunities and challenges, and also the challenges which were brought by the war. So that was actually the starting point when we initiated a quite intensive and open dialogue both between Ukrainian and international actors, let's say, that were not any specific organization. I think we opened a Google form on our website, and around 300 people from all over the world have actually filled in it. So that is where we have started. Then going to the next slide. We were working with the Melitopol city before the war for several years, and an organization called GIZ and the concept of integrated urban planning, which was actively involved, introduced by this organization, was actually a case for Melitopol. And then at this point, we were asked that, of course, we don't understand how the war will unfold, but from the perspective of Melitopol being Ukrainian again, and from the information we know, how things could actually unfold. So this was quite interesting practical experience, which also involved a number of international partners, both from GIZ side and from our side, that actually enabled these different horizons of thinking post-war, but also future-looking, addressing the climate change, addressing the migration, addressing the food and water crises. So that is a kind of analytical exercise, we believe, which could be helpful for the city in the future to actually address the recovery on a more sustainable manner. Going to the next slide. This is something more of a 2023 experience we had working with the Robert Bosch Foundation, supported by the Robert Bosch Foundation, working in Voznesensk. It is Mykolaiv region. So here we went from the perspective, I think, which was voiced by Anton Kolomeitsev in the previous panel, in previous presentation, that we do not expect the dozens of EU organization or global organization come and recover Voznesensk, but from what we understand and from what we know and from the practices which were actually introduced by our foreign colleagues in Ukraine, how we can actually assess the existing assets and how we can actually build another future for Voznesensk from the point where we now, maybe highlighting the key acupuncture areas or typologies of the project that could actually advance us forward, not being only rooted to agriculture and transit, but also actually enabling technologies and added value supply chains. So that was quite an effort, and I think that was a turning point for us in understanding how actually we can interact with our international colleagues within this planning exercise, which resulted in the project on the next slide, which is called Ukrainian Urban Lab, which is a collaborative effort from three organizations on the planning perspective, Habitat, Impact, and Restart, but there are even more organizations supporting on the capacity building side and digital solutions, such as UNITAC and Roskvit Coalition. So here we had a quite interesting example how we actually can work on the ground with specific colleagues from abroad being based in Ukraine and actually planning the recovery of the municipalities. And we understand that we don't have really a lot of time here. I will ask to switch to the next slide and try to conclude. These are a little bit of a sexy titles, but I just want them to stick and give them a little bit of explanation. So right now, I think we need to understand that the humanitarian reaction in the majority of the region is over, unless we take specifically hotspots along the front line. So we are talking now about the interim solutions, which might not necessarily look like the great job Lviv is doing with the recovery projects. However, they could be temporarily, they could be experimentally. So that is something we need to address, that Hromadas sometimes tend to go the beautification trajectory with the donors. However, I believe we now need to look for senses and for the models and for the frameworks being prepared for the kind of bigger action and bigger take. Procedure can often affect the result. Understanding that the Hromadas are now developing either comprehensive recovery plan programs or integrated development concepts prior to spatial development plans in the future. We understand that the same legal procedure could be taken by international and national actors differently. So we can have very different result of following the same procedure, which brings us to the point of a benchmark of a recovery plan for Ukrainian Hromadas, where Ukrainian Hromada has to be not the object but a subject, mentioned fairly by Melanie previously. So, and there is no one size fits all, no magic pill. We need to actually dig deeper and understand the core DNA of the Hromada. We need to understand the core competencies and the assets and like how it could actually grow in the future, and then build our future planning steps upon that. Other than that, just applying specific number of steps would not actually untap full potential, and we will not be reaching the kind of the dreamed build better back. And capacity and trust building are the keys to the local recovery on the medium to long-term scale. What we see now is this kind of saturation of donors all around the regions, and even new donors come and try to actually find their place there. And instead of making that competition for Hromadas to just have a seat, we need to understand how we can actually start and switch to the medium long-term game, when actually Hromadas are not the recipients but the participants of this process, and maybe how we can better coordinate amongst international and national players, stakeholders, to have a wider picture, not a 6 months project, not a 12 months program, but look kind of a little bit more to the future, and that will actually reduce the pressure for delivering results in half year once we have started. So that would be my intro for this time. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Alex. And we'll pass over to our last speaker, Yaryna, on ULEAD in the New European Bauhaus. I'll pass you there.
Thank you very much. I will start with an introduction to what actually ULEAD with Europe program is. We are, as a program of European Union in Ukraine, we are working in the country since 2016. And our main target audience are our main beneficiaries are municipalities, but mainly small municipalities up to 50,000 inhabitants. So as you may understand, we don't work with big cities as Lviv, taking into account and making our assumptions based on the fact that probably bigger cities have more capacities to be more sustainable, to work by their own with international organizations. So our main target audience are small municipalities. What actually gives a ground for all our activities. We are represented in all country with regional offices in all oblasts. Definitely now only the security situation allows it. We are built on three main pillars. Here on the screen is only one, which is connected mainly with local reconstruction and which will build up already after full-scale invasion started. But we also have another two pillars which are connected with capacity development for municipalities, different trainings, educational events, etc. for small municipalities, and also legislation support for national government and for municipalities in terms of questions as decentralization, regional development, and local development. When it comes to local reconstruction as such, as you may see, we work with different topics. After a full-scale invasion, we also started with rapid support of some municipalities. We have had such initiatives as school initiative, where we rebuilt several schools in the country. But we also have important very initiative connected with establishing connection between Ukrainian municipalities and European ones, where Ukrainian municipalities may expect to receive some also financial, but also other ways of support from international, from European mainly municipalities. And also one important element of our work is called project preparation facility, and I will also concentrate a bit more on this topic. So after full-scale invasion, we have understood that there will be big needs for reconstruction, and to make this reconstruction possible, municipalities would need good, ready-to-go projects. That's why we decided to concentrate our activities on this process to support development of 25 ready-to-go projects. I mean the projects already with development of the whole design and tender documentation, which may involve investments right after they will be ready. Definitely here the main challenge is connected with capacities of small and medium municipalities. As you may imagine, working with municipalities as Balaklia in Kharkiv or Borodyanka in Kyiv, they don't have big capacities to develop a big project. So that's why we decided to implement this first in Ukraine, a municipal project preparation facility. Here we always concentrated our activities on the projects on the objects which are in municipal property, and have selected several areas within which we are working. We are working with topics with education. Here we have schools, kindergartens. We work with healthcare topic, local hospitals, also transport. Here mainly such things as bridges and squares. Also, we have water supply and sewage as one of the topic, and waste management, actually also very big and expensive topic for small municipalities. As you may imagine, it is a long-term process. We started in 2023 with an expectation to have by the end of 2024 25 developed projects in 20 municipalities. We are working directly with local self-government, building the group of people who are working with us and with general designer. In this case, we are working with company Delta. That's why they are Austrian company who could also bring expertise as well from Austria and Europe, as well from Ukraine. For instance, several of our objects are also designed by AVR. So you can imagine that such well-known developer could not come to such small municipality without such support as we produce. Once again, I would like to mention that we are a capacity development program. That's why for the whole process of work on the design and tender documentation, we also incorporate the elements of education for municipal workers. We have capacity development events, we have trainings, we support them with analysis of the project, as for instance, gender analysis was done within development of the documentation. Also, we are trying to analyze how good the Build Back Better principle was used in development of those projects. As of now, we are on the stage of finalization of the whole documentation. As you may imagine, the state expertise should also be done for the whole project so that they will be ready to go. And after that, our aim is to look for financing to find really money to realize the projects. Building up on this process, we also decided to move with another topic and bring to Ukraine a bit the question of new European Bauhaus. That's the topic actually with which we started our activities. You may know what actually new European Bauhaus is initiative of European Commission, which started in 2021 with an aim to actually bring the question of Green Deal to the real life of people. It is built on several topics such as sustainability, inclusion, and also beauty or culture, whatever you can understand it or call it. In Ukraine, this topic was and still maybe is not very popular, but we may understand. We have heard also from the speeches of European Commission officials, as for instance from Ursula von der Leyen, the idea that Ukraine should be rebuilt based on Build Back Better, based on new European Bauhaus principle. That's why the question probably is how it may be realized in Ukraine. So we have started some activities in this direction. For definitely, it is only beginning how it may be done. We decided to concentrate our activities mainly on the question of new European Bauhaus Academy, the educational element of new European Bauhaus, with initiative to upskill and reskill 3 million construction workers in EU. And our idea here is to bring the knowledge of new European Bauhaus Academy to Ukraine while creating in Ukraine conditions for future creation of hub of such academy in Ukraine. To do it, we definitely have a very credible partner. It is organization Rinne from Slovenia. They are first pilot hub of a new European Bauhaus in Europe. They are also best case example of new European Bauhaus in Slovenia. Based on their knowledge and experience, we are implementing the project Rebuilding Better Ukraine via New European Bauhaus, where we try to connect different institutions in Ukraine, I mean universities, NGOs, even construction companies who may be interested in the question of upskilling and reskilling the construction ecosystem, bring them together for co-designing and co-thinking about how actually potentially the new European Bauhaus hub may look like in Ukraine, what are the needs of local field, etc. So we here built our this project based on several elements. For instance, we are making the analysis of the needs, of the gaps in knowledge of construction ecosystem in Ukraine. We also definitely conducting some trainings to promote the topic, but also in this process to understand more the needs, to understand more what actually, how people actually in Ukraine see the possibility of usage of the framework of New European Bauhaus in reconstruction, but also just in construction in the country. Next week, we also will have a conference in Brussels dedicated to this topic to bring the knowledge of European hubs and academy of NEP in Europe, and also Ukrainian actors, to give them opportunity to exchange and find possible ways how to bring the knowledge of Europe to Ukraine, but also share our experience and knowledge in the topics connected to construction to actors in Europe. So I will probably stop here. Here are our contacts. We are very happy to share also more. And please, if you follow, for instance, Facebook page, you can still register for the conference next week dedicated to NEP. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Yaryna. Unfortunately, we only have about 3 minutes left, so I will reserve my questions. We have 15 minutes. Okay, excellent. So anyway, maybe we turn it around. I was going to ask some questions, but perhaps I'll open it up to the audience first in case there's something from your side, and if not, we'll come back to the questions that we had in mind. Yes, please. Should I bring?
Yeah, thank you. It's a lot of discussion, and it's really needed to have capacity development in terms of good engineers, good designers, good architects, good employees of local administrations. But maybe you know that in previous section it was chief architect of Lviv was basically showing that it takes a lot of effort and avoiding national norms and national legislations to build better, but not build Soviet. And my question is, do you work with those organizations who are developing norms and developing legislation which limits us to build back as it was, but not build back better? Because if on every stage, every affected person or participant of project have to make effort to don't go in line with norms, but do something good, it's very big probability that on some steps, from that or other reason, people would say, okay, let's just do what it's written in the law. And then we would all have for like next 50 or 100 years, not better, but as it was Soviet. Thank you.
So I guess the question, maybe I'm shortly rephrasing the question. What do you do in terms of policy making or advice to policy makers to actually ensure that there's room to build back better and that we're not kind of stuck in old norms and old regulations?
So maybe I will just make a short statement here. When we are talking about, definitely ULIT works a lot with policymakers, but mainly with the questions dedicated to regional development, not so much to the question of construction norms, etc. But for instance, the potential hub in Ukraine, which I have mentioned, from our perspective, it's very important to creation something like that, and to give to this hub opportunity to think, to talk to policymakers and to think how the norms can be changed. Because definitely we have faced this also in the question of work on the technical documentation. When we want to build it back better and to include all principles of NEP and make it really beautiful and nice, it increase the budget dramatically. What doesn't allow actually municipality to finance it and to even find financing for it. Because as we know, the subsidy, for instance, for school for national government money will go with 20% VAT, which should be paid by municipality. If the school costs 3 million euros, it is hard to imagine how municipality can find even 20% fund. So it's a big question, big topic, how to integrate from one perspective as a Build Back Better principle, NEP principle, or other principle, and from another perspective the reality and the question of costs. Definitely ULIT tries to work with policymakers and definitely integrate where possible ministry and also other actors in this field. But as for me, if I may share my personal opinion, it's more the question of internal capacities and internal actors, different NGOs, organizations in Ukraine, which should push this agenda. Thank you.
Maybe I can also add on. So UN Habitat, we also have this dialogue between different ministries. So of course there is a influence, and we also want to support them on the development of policies. Of course, it's a long process and it takes time. And at least now we are testing kind of, I would say they are pilot project when we are developing these recovery plans in the local level. So also to try it out and see how the plan would look like and how long it takes to develop, how much resources are needed, that we can also then feed back to the national level. What are the lessons learned from these local level pilots? And maybe if there is then space to change some of the legislation as well. Maybe Charlotte, you can also reflect on UN Habitat expertise.
I think
I can also add.
Oh, sorry. Over to Melanie.
Oh, apologies, I didn't want to interrupt. Yeah, no, I can also add to that because I really agree with the person who asked the question that, of course, the changing of the policy is a super crucial step that also needs to happen. And I mean, at least for us, for UNECE, we are not so much active in changing the urban planning policy, but we have been dealing a lot with housing. And we had people from our team being involved in drafting of the law of the fundamentals of housing policy in Ukraine, because also like the housing policy, as you know, is very much outdated, doesn't allow for social housing, etc. And that is really like, yeah, long-term work that takes quite some time. But for example, for that, it's been drafted with all different kinds of stakeholders. It's been submitted officially to the government, and we hope that it will be considered by November. Yeah, for example, it's one thing that we are doing. But yeah, also we're hoping for a follow-up of our project and also be more engaged in supporting the ministry with the planning policy.
Thank you so much, Melanie. I think you're pointing to a really important aspect there, that whilst there is a lot of policy advice also happening at different levels, also national level, I think the timeframes are very different. And especially a lot of the work that we're doing in terms of developing comprehensive recovery programs and so on, that's really a very quick turnaround. And also the funding is often very short term. So donor countries might give you funding for a year, which then doesn't necessarily allow for enough time to really influence and draft good policies longer term. So it's kind of a challenge in that perspective as well. Do we have other questions from the audience? Yes, please.
Hello, my name is Anne. I'm urban planner from Kharkiv, and actually I just back to Lviv from Kharkiv, and I have a question for Melanie. We have different projects in Kharkiv. It's like piece of big picture of the city, and how we can combine this picture for some special planning document, because we have vision from Norman Foster, but it's actually sorry. It's like formal document, and this document don't have answer for city development, and how we can connect all these projects from municipality. We know Kharkiv municipality proposed projects for railway station in Kharkiv, and actually how we can collect this for one document for cities. And actually it's first question. Second question, it's about Saltovka project, about competitions to develop of housing in Saltovka. Maybe we need to start discussion with locals about these neighborhoods, because it's a very difficult question for Kharkiv. It's border of the city, and we know people die in this place, and maybe it's place for memorialization and place for some memorial or not living. Maybe we can start dialogue with locals. So it's like propose, and so.
I'll just summarize your question to make sure we got them right, and also to make sure Melanie got them. So the first
one
it
was also a bit quiet, but I think I understood.
Okay, good. Over to you.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, thank you so much for the question. And there's an echo, actually. I hear myself. maybe that can be changed. Okay, maybe it works now. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, it actually also points back to the question that was asked before. I mean, the concept master plan that was developed by Norman Foster in Kharkiv is really more like a visionary guidance for the city, and it cannot replace by any means like the general plan of the city. And of course, everybody's aware of that, because yeah, that kind of work can only be carried out by official planning, like Ukrainian planning offices. So, and nevertheless, it can really serve as, like I said, a visionary guidance for the amendment of the general plan or different kinds of plans. And it also does not only have like spatial components, but also economic and social components, which can be picked up then by the city. But yeah, as I also mentioned earlier, it's really, it's not about short-term repair or what can be done immediately, but what we are engaging with, also together with the Norman Foster Foundation, is really more like the long-term development of the city. And yeah, that kind of works obviously also takes a lot of time. Yeah, the second part of your question regarding Saltivka. Yeah, we know that there was a lot of discussion taking place, even like what to do best with that part of the city. Do people actually really want to come back? Is it too exposed? It's on the outskirts of the city. Yeah, but I think also maybe have a look at the submissions of our competition. Like many of the people participated in the competition are taking that into account. And yeah, there's still ongoing discussions that we're having on a weekly basis together with the city authorities, and yeah, there's a lot going on.
Thank you very much, Melanie. Just check.
And also, sorry, just one thing. I have to leave at 5 for another meeting because I think
we'll
we're
be
running
wrapping
out of
up.
time. Yes, sorry for that.
Thank you. Maybe I'll just pose one question to Alex, actually. So thinking about the different stakeholders that are involved, international, national donors that might be funding programs, how do you, within that sphere of multiple stakeholders, multiple interests, how do you still ensure that the response or the spatial planning is actually human-centric and serves those who will be living in the areas that that we're planning?
No, that's a very good question, and I can answer that we try to do our best to stay, with the human-oriented planning, because right now it is quite difficult, as I think Pavlo mentioned, to follow the procedure and actually build better back. So I think it is a lot of iterative approach, that we don't really look for best practices and try to implement them, but we try to synthesize the Ukrainian context with external frameworks and try to see how can we actually advance with another level of participation. So it is less formal, and it is not, just placed on the website of the local administration for 10 days and then accepted without any changes. How we can actually ensure various stakeholders, like business, NGOs, local administration, be present at the same table and provide a kind of facilitated discussion, because Hromada is a small world and everyone knows everyone, and not always people agree with each other. So it's also about being a facilitator and moderator and trying to provide a careful external view to the things which Hromada sometimes is not seen, but it is there. It could be either mineral resources, it could be geopolitical place on the map, it could be some cultural and historical facts that could be actually a basis for the new identity of the Hromada. In a way, it is also about trying to depict the war-related events and happenings on the territory of the Hromada as a part of the new story, and then this new story has a human face of the people who live there. But of course, I think previously asked about the policies, I think it is also about politics in our country, which we are like somehow not bringing to the table. So just comparing two different ministries, we will see a different trajectory in actually unfolding some certain housing policies and also spatial planning policies. And then when we come to the materials, I think it is all much more complicated than just providing the good solution and a way how to implement that to the government, to the minister. I think it is about actually negotiating on a high level as well, how we can actually, change the status quo, which is somehow right now very comfortable for the big developers, but not really comfortable for a big change and the various spheres which are connected to the recovery. So that would be my short answer here.
Thank you so much. And with this, I think we'll be wrapping up. So maybe just a very short concluding remark from my side. I think the key is we've seen that different actors bring a lot of value, they bring a lot of skills, expertise, and so on. But I think to me, what stood out also of the last year working in Ukraine is really the ability to continue staying self-critical and reflecting and having exactly these kind of conversations that we just had today, pointing to our own weaknesses and building on each other's strengths. So thanks very much for taking part in this conversation, and over to the other Oleksandr.